Well, I have some news for you. Just a couple months shy of my 40th anniversary in broadcast television, I'm retiring. Now, don't worry though, I'm retiring from broadcast television. I'm not retiring from YouTube. Bryan and I are going to still keep making videos for you to enjoy and to make fun of. But I was going through my files at home on my computer and I ran across something that I thought we had lost. I found the 2004 pilot episode for Woodturning Workshop. Bryan and I had come up with the idea to do a show on woodturning. He wound up behind the camera and somehow I wound up in front of it. But anyway, we brought the pilot to the station and they liked it enough that they said, let's go forward with it. And kind of you say from there it was history. But the problem we had was I realized that the shop wasn't ready for prime time, much less me. So I completely gutted the shop, repainted it, put up new walls, everything was different. Went out and bought a professional size lathe. Needless to say, the pilot didn't match any of that, so we never used it. And at that point when I forgot where I put it and I thought we'd lost it. But like I said, rummaging through my files at home, I found it on my computer. So what I have for you right now is the lost 2004 pilot episode of Woodturning Workshop. Enjoy.
That's a good boy. Okay. Hi, welcome to the Woodturning Workshop. I'm your host, Tim Yoder. This show is about one of the most popular and fastest growing hobbies around, wood turning. Today, we're going to make some pins. Let's get to some pin making. You're going to be one popular person with your family and friends. These make some wonderful gifts, and they're going to be amazed at the stuff you can turn out. They're easy to make, they're fun to make, and I just love doing these. Everybody likes doing these. Down here I got some selections of some pins. This does not represent all the pins you can make. There are dozens of different types of pins out there. These first ones are slimline. They're the simplest ones to start with. A nice straight cut. You can get little different styles. That's kind of nice. Over here we have some deco pins. A little more complicated, but it's still a straight line cut. You just have a little bit different fixtures, which kind of give it some class there. Up here we have some European pins, and these are really nice shiny. These are platinum. Beautiful colors on that. And over here we have some designer pins. And designer pins are another step up. They're up here with the European. They're really beautiful. And then a really cool pin that I found out about just recently is a little Havana pin. Excellent, elegant looking writing instrument. As you can see, these pins are made of a lot of different woods, a lot of different materials. It's wonderful the variety of things you can find to make your pins out of. It's really cool. And what these are made out of are pin blanks. And pin blanks simply are rectangular pieces of wood or man-made material that you can drill and cut and make your pin out of. Now the two that we're going to use today are these two pieces right here. This one's called True Stone and this is Maple Burl. An example of True Stone, this is True Stone next to it also, is this little Havana pin. It polishes up beautifully. There's no finish on this pin at all. It's really neat. And a good example of the Maple Burl is this pin right here. And look at all the bird's eyes in it. It really gives you an interesting, elegant pin to look at. Welcome to the world of pin kits. Might look a little bit complicated, but it's not so bad. One thing you have to keep in mind is you have to stay organized. If you don't stay organized, you can get into a lot of trouble. I know, I've done it, had a lot of experience at it. Made some weird pins that I wouldn't want to show anybody. Now over here I have plastic. I love these little sorting bins because I can keep everything that I need separate that goes with the different pin kits. Each pin kit requires a different set of bushings. You get these mixed up, you're in trouble. Okay, over here what I have is a little system I figured out for my pin kits. I keep each different pin kit and all its components in one of these bags. I keep all the pin kits. You can see here I printed off a picture from the website where I got the pin so I know what it looks like. It's a good way of keeping things organized. Now real quickly, let's look at the different parts of the pin. This is the Havana pin kit. This is the Havana pin we saw a little bit earlier. You obviously see there's the tip of the pin. Here's this little nib or bottom here where you can actually screw the cap back onto. Here's the top of the pin. Really neat, you can get a special clip here which has a nice crystal in it. It's really beautiful that way. These are the tubes, the brass tubes that all these parts are received by. These tubes are actually inside of here and glued into the blank. These pieces then will force themselves through a press into there so you get a tight lock fit. It's all force fitted. It's a really neat thing. Well, let's prepare the blanks now for cutting. It's very simple. You grab your blank and you grab your tubes. Get yourself a pin. Now I like to pick out the best looking part of the blank. See, it's getting a little straight here, but I love the swirl here. So I'm going to take this blank. I want to leave about 1/8 of an inch on this end, 1/8 of an inch on this end, and simply draw across with my pen and make a mark. Take my second brass tube and do the same thing here. Now if you're making lots of pins with lots of the same blanks, you're going to do a couple things. First thing is you want to draw a line right here because you're going to want this grain and this grain to match up when the pin is put together. The other thing is if you're doing 12 of these, you might want to mark this one A and A so your next green blank you don't get mixed up. Now this blank over here with the maple burl, it's very critical that you look at it and figure out where the best figure of the wood is because you don't want to waste it. Over here I'm losing a little bit of the burl, but I've got a lot of burl on this end. So you simply do the same thing. You take your brass tube, you make a mark, you take your other brass tube, you make your mark. Now let's go have some fun with some power tools. Remember now, when you're using your power tools, I want you to play hard, but play safe. Always wear your safety goggles. Your eyes are extremely important to you. And always follow all the directions so you know what you're doing and don't hurt yourself. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're simply going to cut the blanks to length following the diagrams that we've laid out. This material, this composite material, cuts very easily, just like wood. Just take your time running it through. One thing I like to do too is I like to save these little pieces because you can use them for projects later. Don't throw anything away. You wouldn't be a good wood turner if you did. Same with the wood. We're just going to run it through. Now that we've cut the blanks to length, we have to drill the holes to receive the brass tubes. Now, how do you hold your blanks on the drill press safely? Well, you can use a wooden clamp like this, clamp it down, and simply drill. If you're doing a lot of blanks, a lot of repetition, this can get a little bit old. I'm a guy who likes gizmos. This is my newest gizmo. This is a self-centering blank vise. If you notice, as I turn this, both sides move. So once I have this mounted and locked down to the lathe and centered, I never have to do any other setup. I simply pop a blank in and I can drill and I'm centered every time. I've got everything set up now and I'm ready to drill. I just want to point out a couple of things. I've got my self-centering vise already centered and it's in position. I've got the blank mounted. You can see underneath the blank I have a sacrificial piece of wood. That's there for when the drill bit emerges from the other side of the blank, it won't blow it out. If you didn't have anything under there, you wind up with a jagged looking hole and it might destroy your blank. You might not have enough wood left over to make your pin. That's an expensive mistake. Another thing I've done is I've set my drill to 500 RPM. You want to go slow. Heat buildup is an enemy of pin blanks, so you don't want to have it get hot. It will split it wide open. I've got the proper bit installed for this pin kit, so I'm ready to drill now. Go ahead and turn it on. I want to go in slowly with the drill. I don't want to, if you go in quickly, the bit could wander from left to right. So you go in slowly, start your hole. You want to actually pump the drill bit up and down and clear the chips out as you go along. That also helps reduce heat, and that'll keep you from splitting your blank. Takes a little bit of while, but patience will pay off. That's one of the most important things about this. I've got the true stone blank mounted now. Same procedure, only difference is it's a little bit denser than wood. You got to take it just a touch slower. If you notice, I also have a much larger bit. This kit calls for bigger holes, so I've got to even be more careful about heat buildup. Take it slow. Okay, got that drilled, got a nice hole. We're ready to put the brass tubes in now. There's a couple things we have to do to prepare them though before we glue them into the blanks. First thing is to scuff them up a little bit. Right now this is very smooth and there's no teeth or bite to it for the glue to hang on to. So you just take some sandpaper, just roll it in there quickly. See, we got some nice scratch marks on there. Already did this tube, it's nice and shiny. Got all those scratches in there, that's good. Okay, we want this to go into the tube like so. Now we're going to have to prepare this with glue, and I want to use some polyurethane glue. You can use CA glue, you can use epoxy. I just happen to like the polyurethane glue because it foams and it fills the area and all the voids. You see I'm applying water. Polyurethane glue requires water to help activate the bond. I'm going to take this tube, I'm going to roll this tip in the glue. I want the glue to be all the way up to the tip. because I want a good bond from the very beginning. Now I'm going to take this, and this is the important part. I'm going to put the tube in here and start inserting it and pulling it out a little bit. Insert and then pull out a little bit. What I'm doing by pulling out, you can see it's starting to coat the tube beautifully. That way I'll get a good bond all the way down. Now one problem when using maple like this is it's very porous. Now I put water in there so it swelled a little bit. So let's get out some persuasion. Okay, we got one tube done. I'm going to do the rest of them. And believe me, you don't always have to pound them in. The glue's dried on our blanks now. As you can see, the polyurethane foam has expanded out. That's why I like it so much, because it's filled all the voids. But we've got to clean these blanks up a bit. We want to trim them to where the brass is very close to the ends of the blank. So we're going to use our bandsaw for that. Just carefully bring it in. I'm just taking off the polyurethane on the front, simply because, see there, we got some bright brass. That's almost too close. I didn't want to do that. Now here, if you can see, the tube is in about 1/4 of an inch. I want to cut away about 1/4 of an inch. And get closer to the brass. I did it again a little close, but that's okay. Now I'll show you on the maple here the same technique. I just want to clean off that polyurethane. See, we're right there close. I'm going to trim the end here. Okay, we're closer to the brass. Now I'm going to show you how we clean this up so you can get the brass nice and shiny. This is one of the most critical stages of making your pin. We're going to be trimming the blanks. And what we want to do with the blanks is we want to trim them to where the blank itself is perfectly flush and in line with the tube there. And the reason that is so important is if you look at this pin, you'll see absolutely no gap between the band and the blank here. If you don't have these trued up perfectly flush, you'll wind up with a gap and have an ugly pin. Now the way you achieve that perfect flush is with a pin mill. I've got one mounted, I've got a larger one here. Pin mill goes down, and by turning and cutting, these are the cutting parts, it'll make this flush. You can use an adapter when you have larger tubes. They'll slide over here, and it will keep this true and in parallel with the brass. I've had to actually make some out of wood for these blanks because these tubes are larger than any adapter I could find. So that works like that. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how we do one right here. Bring the lathe on. It's nice and slow. You can actually bring the blank up to it to get it centered. We're going in now. And we just barely touch it to it. See, it's cutting beautifully. Now, shiny brass is something I might have said earlier that's very important to have. When you get shiny brass, I don't know if you can see that there, that means you're perfectly flush. You have to do both ends of the pin blank, so to flip it over, bring it back down. And there, we got shiny brass on that. 3 more blanks and we're ready to turn. We finally made it to the lathe. We're going to turn that pin now. There are a few things you still have to have though to finish this pin. First thing that's very important is you have to have a pin mandrel. This is what receives the blanks so you can have them mounted on the lathe and turn them. And I had mentioned earlier bushings. Bushings are extremely important. They're little sizing elements that slip onto the blank, and that's the outer diameter of your pin. You want to wind up finishing your blank down to that diameter. That way all the pieces fit in together. Bushing slides over. You take your pin blank, you put it there. We have a second bushing, which is the middle one here. And this one's a little different. We're going to have a band which goes on this pin, and this is the band sizing element. Use that to size the outer part of the pin. We have our second blank come on, and this is where those lines I told you about are very important. This way we're matching our grain up. So this is the middle of the pin, this is the top of the pin, this is the bottom of the pin. Put our last bushing on, and then we put a knob on here to hold everything nice and tight. We don't have to line that up, but we can. And now we're going to bring the tailstock up. And we want this to be nice and firm because when we get turning, we don't want that to wobble at all. We're going to be using 2 tools, not very many this time. We're going to simply use a parting tool, and we're going to be using a small roughing gouge. I like that a lot better than a skew. I have better control of it. So let's get our eyes on, glasses on, and let's start turning. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to rough out the blanks. And I'm doing a critical step here. I'm making sure that my tool rest is parallel to the tool mandrel. And I'm going to be using my tool rest as a straight guide. You're turning a lot of air here. You can actually see a blurring. Well, that's because these edges are flipping by and it's not solid wood all the way. You want to start real carefully and real lightly with your gouge coming in. Bring it high. You can actually hear it now. I'm running the bevel, this part of the tool, on the wood. As I bring it down, you can see it starts to cut. As it cuts, I want to just come across and remove it really lightly. I'm not putting any pressure on this. And this can go fairly fast. Gosh, this is the best part. You get to make shavings. All that preparation, this is where it really is worth all that work. Now my objective, I'm still going to bring this wood here down to the diameter of the bushings, and I've got a ways to go. But I'm starting to reach out over the tool rest a little bit, so I want to come over to this other side and work on this blank. Okay, I've got these down to a rough diameter, but I still have a ways to go. I want to bring the tool rest in again, and again, make sure that it's parallel with the mandrel, because the trick I'm going to show you now is a really nice one, and you got to use your fingers just right to make it work. I want to make straight lines across. This pin doesn't have any curve to it. I'm going to jam my finger under here. I'm going to take the tool and pinch it, and by holding it that way, I actually am making a straight line. That's why this is going to be parallel to the wood. So I'm able to turn and make a perfectly straight blank. This way I can get really close to the finished diameter of the pin, and I won't have to do a lot of sanding or adjustment. You can see I'm getting closer to the bushings now, so I'm going to take it slowly, take it lightly. And if I didn't mention it before, make sure you always sharpen your tools right before you start. It takes a sharp tool to make a nice finished pin, because you don't want to get into a situation at this point where you have a dull tool and you start tearing the wood. You tear the wood at this point, you've lost the blank. Now I'm still probably about a 32nd of an inch high. I want to get it down a little closer than that, because I don't want to do a lot of sanding. I can run my finger across this. It doesn't hurt to run your finger across the wood while it's spinning. You leave it there, it might get hot. I'm just feeling where the edge is meeting here. And I got a little ways to go yet. Okay, I don't want to get too close and screw it up, so I'm within sanding distance. Now I'm going to work on this side of the blank. Remember now, this little bushing here, this moves. This is the outer diameter of the top piece of the pin. It's the size of the band that's going to go on here. So I want to turn this blank down to this size and this end down to this other bushing over here. Again, this is a straight cut, so I'm using my fingers to just keep a straight line here. I want you to pay attention to something other than the tool right now. Look at my body. I am moving my whole body with the tool. That's the way you make good cuts when you're turning wood. Big or small, you want to do this. The reason is, if I stood here and moved my hands, I'm curving. Everything moves and twists. I'm making a triangle with my body here, and it's locked in, and I'm solid, and as I move, that tool stays perfectly aligned with that piece of wood. Remember, I said this bushing represents this ring, which goes on the pin. The depth of this ring, it's going to slide onto, let me show you there. It's going to slide onto the blank like that. What I have to do right now, I have to take my parting tool and very carefully part out 3/16 of an inch on the wood. Now this is a double-sized bushing. I can move this over here. See the bushing right here? I'm coming down to that size of the bushing. Now I want to see if this will slide over the wood. Not quite yet. I gotta go a little further. There we go. See how that's fitting on there? That's how the band is going to fit. I got one more cut to match that. Then we can start sanding. Excellent. Now it's time to start sanding. I've done one little trick, put a little piece of masking tape down to here to keep this bushing from sliding back and forth. I want it up here tight. If it slides away, I'll round off that edge, and I want to keep that nice and sharp. I'm going to start with 150 here. I'm going to work my way through to 600. And in between grits, I'm actually going to stop the lathe and sand back and forth with it stationary. And the reason is to take out scratch marks. I have a little HEPA filter running in the shop right now, and you always need to take care of yourself as far as breathing dust, because that can be dangerous. I don't want to take this down to the diameter with the 150. I just want to get it smoothed out and get any tool marks off right now. I'll use my 220 and my 400 to get down to the sizes of the bushing. Okay, now I really feel I can go one more grit without having to stop this. So I'm going to go to my 220 here, fold it in half. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this, I'm just running it back and forth. This might be kind of the boring part, but it's also the nicest part because you get to see your pin really take shape. I'm just a few thousandths of an inch away from being to the diameter right there. And I'm very close here, so I'm just going to lightly go here. Okay. I want to stop the lathe for a second now, because obviously I'm making scratch marks as I'm using my sandpaper. I want to sand back and forth with the grain. Now this is burl, so it really doesn't have a grain. But what I'm doing is I'm removing the swirled scratches that are caused by the sandpaper there. And the whole reason of doing this is that if I keep going with smaller and smaller grits, finer and finer grits, those big swirl marks will still stay in there, so you'll actually have a bad surface, a poor looking surface. Okay, so that looks good. Now I'll start up and keep sanding through to 600. I've sanded the 600 grit, but this is a trick I like to do. People say that if you sand higher than 600 grit, that you're wasting your time and you can't see the difference in the pen, but I don't believe that. I've actually tried this myself and it really does work. I actually have some finer grits here, which goes from 1500 grit all the way up to 12,000 grit. Virtually, I'm polishing the wood. The higher the surface luster you can get on the wood itself, the shinier your pen will be in the end, the better it's going to look. Any finish you put on this pen is going to wear off after a while, and if you wear it off and come down to 220 grit wood, it's going to get dirt and grime in the pores. Even 600 grit will get some dirt in it, but if you sand all the way up to 12,000 grit, you're going to have a very polished surface which will stay nice and beautiful the life of the pen. Okay, you can see the difference. I've gone to 12,000 grit now, and it has this high luster and high shine to it. It really is beautiful, and all the burl is standing out. But we're going to bring this thing to life. I'm going to put on my finish now, and it's called True Oil. It's a gunstock oil, and it's very, very tough. I'm doing this by hand without spinning at first, because there are so many voids in a piece of wood like this that you might not get the True Oil into it if you have the lathe spinning at high speed. So there, it's really nice. Isn't that gorgeous? Now I'm going to turn it on. I'm actually going to buff it in and use a little bit of heat with the friction from the paper towel to dry the True Oil up. Okay, now I'm going to switch to a dry spot on the paper towel and buff it. And once this is buffed, we're going to put the other blanks on and we're going to turn those down. We're ready to turn our Havana pen now. We've got the True Stone mounted with the bushings for the Havana pen, and it's basically the same procedure. Got to go really slow, maybe even a little slower with the True Stone because it really is stone that you're turning. It's got some binders and fillers holding the stone together. Oh, and I re-sharpen my tools because you want to have a very sharp tool when you're doing this. There we go. And this will dull your tools quickly. So you might even have to resharpen once or twice while you're cutting down the pin blank. But we'll get these roughed out to size. One thing I'm starting to do right now is I'm not doing the straight across. I'm starting to put a curve in here. The tip of this pin to the middle, it gets from thin to wide. And I don't want it to be straight, I want it to have a nice little curve to it to where it has a little flow to it. Same will be for the top part. So this, you move your body, but you're also making a curve with your body. Not that straight motion where you're using your fingers earlier. These are very, very fine shavings I'm taking now. I'm right down about to where I want the blank to be, so I don't want to take very much off at all. I've got the curve the way I want it. Now all I have to do is make a cut for the bushing, or for the band. This one's a little different. I need an 1/8 inch cut here, and it goes all the way down to the brass. And you have to be very careful with the cut so you don't chip the edges. That looks good. We've got all our blanks sanded now and finished. We're down to the fun part. We're going to start pressing them together. What I have in front of me is a pin press. It's a neat little device. It actually presses this way. This part is adjustable for different pin part lengths. I'm going to start with the first part of the Havana pin. I have my instructions, laid out in front of me here, and follow these carefully, because if you get confused on this, you can get in a lot of trouble. First part is to put this plastic barrel in, and it goes all the way down. And I've already preset the length of this. I need to push that just a hair further. So I'm going to undo this, move it forward just a bit. There we go. I have to get that plastic piece flush inside. Next part that I put on is this nice little shiny part. What would you call that? I guess you'd call that the ring. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to press that in. This is strictly a friction fit on this part. There we go, that went in nicely. See, it fits together beautifully. Okay, now we have other parts of the pin we're going to put together. It's a little bit boring, but you just follow the instructions and press them all together the same way. Not bad for a few hours in the workshop. A pin is something that everyone enjoys. I hope you learned something from this, and I hope you had a good time watching. We'll see you next week.